Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Where we continue the thankless task of providing the facts and the figures that are needed to make sense of what is going on in this country. You will not, sadly, find us on this programme indulging in the feelings, the nonsense and the inflated pyramid of piffle that passes for political commentary from people like Digby Jones. Oh, boy. Because it's Ford in the news today. They have warned the Prime Minister that they are preparing to remove production from the United Kingdom. So let's get this silly stuff out of the way first. People will start telling lies about the transfer of the transit plant from Dagenham to Turkey many moons ago and claim that this is somehow not part of genuine Brexit shenanigans. They will accuse the head of Ford of being in some, I don't know, paid by George Soros, is he? I don't know anymore. Where do you get your next arguments from? Digby Jones is on social media. He's trending on Twitter this morning. Digby Jones, to the best of my knowledge, was a solicitor in Birmingham, and there's nothing wrong with being a solicitor in Birmingham. Quite genuinely, some of my best friends are solicitors in Birmingham. And I think he just applied because he saw an advert in the paper to be head of the CBI. He'd never actually run any businesses or anything like that. Not that that's an obstacle to understanding issues, but you remember what he said before the referendum? You remember what he said about the automotive industry before the referendum? Digby Jones, former head of the CBI. If you wonder why people like Digby Jones and Tim Weatherspoon and who's that? That David Buick. You may not have heard of him, but he pops up sometimes on radio stations and TV stations. If you're wondering why these people who don't appear to have any particular understanding or qualifications to comment pop up so often on your screens, the answer is there's so few people who are genuinely in business that are prepared in any way to promote Brexit. So you end up with a pretty much a relay team of Digby Jones, Tim Martin from Weatherspoon. Is there anyone else? Who? Well, no, James Dyson's never. He hasn't given an interview about Brexit since before Brexit, I don't think. Anyway, he's no longer a British businessman. He's a Singaporean businessman. Now, he happens to be British, but his business is Singaporean, as we know. Who else is there? So that's why. And because we live in this ludicrous era of false equivalence, you have the man that runs Ford, the head of the Confederation of British Industry, the man that runs Nissan, the man that runs Toyota. You've got them all on one side, and then on the other side, and now we cross live to a former solicitor from Birmingham who's never run a business in his life. And this is what he had to say about the automotive industry before reality.
Germany sells 1 million cars a year in Britain. So the first time that this Frenchman who's going to be negotiating for Brussels says, well, we're going to put 10% on tariff on every Jaguar that's sold in Berlin, I sincerely hope that the Brit doing it the other way will say, well, then there's 10% on every BMW sold in Britain. And the moment that happens, and every Audi, and every Mercedes, and every Fiat. So the moment you say, well, I'm sticking a 10% tariff on every Focus that's made in Valencia and sold in Birmingham, I sincerely hope that the boss of Ford, well, I know I'm right, the boss of Ford, the boss of Audi, the boss of Mercedes, straight into Merkel, saying, what are you doing? And I think it'll be zero tariff, not because Britain wants it, but because it's in no one's interest that it doesn't happen.
So, I know I'm right, is the key phrase there. Because he's still wanging away on Twitter about how none of it's his fault. It's all the fault of the other boys, the other nasty boys who ran away. They did it and they ran away. It turns out that when people like Digby Jones talked about taking back control, under his own analysis of why everything's gone so horribly wrong, it really meant giving all of the control of our departure from the European Union to the European Union, which even I find slightly surprising in retrospect, because how else was it ever going to play out? I'm leaving you. All right, see ya. Can I take this, that? No, of course you can't. You're leaving me. Off you trot. Taking back control turns out to have meant surrendering it completely. And listen to this clip again, because I think Digby Jones deserves a bit of a coating this morning. I'm sick to death now of these people still popping up. If you soiled yourself in public 2.5 years ago and didn't realise until relatively recently that everything you said was wrong, fair enough. I'm a compassionate man. We all make mistakes, all of us. But if you really, when they ring you up and say, would you care to appear on the Today programme, you should say, I don't really think I deserve to because I've been wrong about everything. Why are you still phoning me up and booking me? I've been wrong about Can you imagine any other area of life where you could be wrong about everything and still get sort of consulted as an expert in the same sector? It'd be a bit like if you were a football manager for a month and you lost every single game 27-0. You wouldn't get invited to appear on Match of the Day every week as a pundit. If you were rubbish at football, you weren't the greatest. If you were actually rubbish at it, I mean, what other line of work is there where you can be completely wrong and rubbish and still get consulted by major media organisations as an apparent expert in your field? Why don't we have David Icke every day telling us how the royal family are lizards? Seriously, where is he? I wonder where he stands on Brexit. Genuinely, I wonder where he stands on Brexit. Someone will tell me. I don't want to speculate. It's going to come back to bite me on the bum. Turns out he's a massive Ramona. Oh, boy. Listen to this again. Listen out for a couple of things here. Listen out for the phrase. I want to play the whole thing. I've got a shortened version as well. If you know Digby Jones, tell him to ring us, will you? And put forward his side of the story. 0345 606 0973. Because I want you to listen out for two things in this clip. The first is, I know I'm right. I know I'm right. The second is, the Frenchman. That's really interesting. Because I think we probably tried a little bit too hard in the immediate aftermath of the Brexit vote to excuse a lot of people from the jingoism and xenophobia of which many were guilty, but by no means all. Of course, as a caller to Nick Ferrari demonstrated yesterday, when I say loads and loads of people voted for Brexit who don't have a racist bone in their body, what racists hear is me saying everyone who voted for Brexit is a racist. So we'll just qualify that. Listen out for two things here. Why mention the nationality? And then and what I hope the Brit will do, because this is exceptionalism in its purest form. This is somebody who doesn't understand anything. Digby Jones's great gift is a pathological inability to understand how little he understands. It's an astonishingly empowering phenomenon, that. I almost envy him. Imagine, I mean, Swiss David Davis has it as well. Imagine walking into a room and being too dumb to appreciate how dumb you actually are and telling yourself that you're brilliant. So remember, Davis said not long ago, you don't have to be very clever to do this job, you know. This is a man who wanted to be Prime Minister, probably still does on some level. You don't have to be very clever to do this job. No, you don't need to have documents and papers in front of you. Negotiating with the European Union is rather like making love to a beautiful woman. All right, we'll play that again before close of play today. But Digby Jones wanders into a room, tells himself he's clever, and isn't clever enough to realise how dumb he actually is, which is an astonishing gift. And what he reinforces his utterly, utterly bogus sense of superiority with is the geography of his birth. So he sits there and he thinks, well, what do you need to win these negotiations? Answer, you need to be British, because the other fella's a Frenchman. So listen to this again. What's that phrase in Ozymandias, the Shelley poem? Is it look upon these and weep? Listen to this again and weep.
Germany sells 1 million cars a year in Britain. So the first time that this Frenchman who's going to be negotiating for Brussels says, well, we're going to put 10% on tariff on every Jaguar that's sold in Berlin, I sincerely hope that the Brit doing it the other way will say, well, then there's 10% on every BMW sold in Britain. And the moment that happens, and every Audi, and every Mercedes, and every Fiat. So the moment you say, well, I'm sticking a 10% tariff on every Focus that's made in Valencia and sold in Birmingham, I sincerely hope that the boss of Ford, well, I know I'm right, the boss of Ford, the boss of Audi, the boss of Mercedes, straight into Merkel, saying, what are you doing? And I think it'll be zero tariff, not because Britain wants it, but because it's in no one's interest that it doesn't happen.
10:13 is the time. I don't know what questions to ask you this morning. I can't just do what's going on again. But how can somebody like that still be in the public sphere? Because we know now what the boss of Ford has said to the Prime Minister. The boss of Ford has said to the Prime Minister, if there's a no-deal Brexit, which would potentially create the no-tariff scenario which Digby Jones is talking ignorantly about, by accident, not for the reasons he explains, then the head of Ford has said that they would move production out of Britain. But he said then, I know I'm right, And the producers, many of whom I love and count among my closest friends, are still phoning up clowns like this and asking them for comment. So if you need to understand why the madness is unravelling in the way that it is, why is it 44 days to go? We don't know what Brexit means. The answer is because we keep putting people like Digby Jones on the television or on the radio, and Tim Martin and David Buick. These people are wrong about everything. It's quite incredible how wrong they are, but they lack the intelligence to realise how little they understand. So the Wetherspoons bloke publishes his own magazine now, hands it out in his pubs, touting utterly erroneous claims. And then saying, oh, and here's some quotes at the back from people so that you can't accuse us of not being balanced. And then Mr. Martin writes his own commentary across the top of this balance, deriding it and criticising it from the perspective of being very, very good at running pubs for people who don't like pubs. Credit where it's due. So how have we ended up in this situation? That's because I've got my theory. I think, working in the sector that I work in, and listen, there's no false modesty here. The main reason why I chose 10 years ago to make a radio programme that eschewed contributions from other journalists and politicians and concentrated almost exclusively on you as callers was in large part because of a pecking order. You know, you come on after the breakfast show gets first dibs on everyone. So either I went for second dibs, people that Nick didn't really want to talk to about the major stories of the day, or I just nixed them all off and focused entirely upon ordinary members of the public like me and you. So there's not an ideological, it's not a claim that I do the job better than people who have guests on. I understand why you need guests. I've worked at Newsnight at the BBC and watched producers with 5 minutes to go desperately trying to find someone who will come in and defend a certain position. So if you need someone from a business point of view to defend Brexit, and there aren't any business people, you get an ex-solicitor from Birmingham to come in and shoot the breeze. But he's been wrong about everything, and he's still getting booked. So it's too late now. I'm thinking more about the future, whatever's next on the agenda for this country, where ignorant people and or people in the pay of dark money they refuse to disclose, in the case of the hard-right lobby groups masquerading as think tanks and educational charities, they get into the studios. Migration Watch, another great example. Migration Watch publish some research that completely ignores elements of the research they're publishing and cherry picks the stuff that fits their narrative of immigration being the root of all evil. And they're everywhere. But we won't get too distracted today. We will focus on Digby Jones, actually, because there's a problem here. There is a major problem here. I wish it wasn't about Brexit, because obviously the battle lines of Brexit have been drawn now. You don't waste 10 pence ringing me to tell me that you knew all along there was going to be lots and lots of economic damage and you really voted for Brexit because you don't understand what the word sovereignty means. Just confine that to Facebook pages and Twitter, because it's part of the problem, not the solution. Silly people saying silly things, whether it's on a Facebook page with your mates or whether it's on Question Time with Digby Jones, that's the reason why we're in the mess we're in. That's the reason why, with 44 days to go, the head of Ford is warning that he might move production out of the United Kingdom. That's not Project Fear, that's Project Kia. Boom!
Headlines this morning in Britain talk darkly of the Dutch sweeping up British businesses, while in their Dutch equivalent there's a euphoric claim that they've found a Brexit goldmine. The lifestyle, the ambience, the proficiency in English have always made Amsterdam attractive to business, but the Dutch government says the 42 companies moving here last year, all giving Brexit as a reason, is a huge increase on the 18 the year before. Rex London, who sell and distribute gifts and homeware across the continent, are one of those making provision for life after Brexit, setting up and expanding here in the Netherlands to secure their future business within the borders of the EU.
What we would be looking at is relocating a significant part of our business, our distribution business, to within the European Union, so we could supply our customers in a frictionless way, as we do at the moment, but after Brexit we may have to be within the European Union to do that.
But the 900 staff who'll soon fill Amsterdam's new home of the European Medicines Agency have without doubt been lost to London through Brexit. And when regulators move, others follow. But significant as this relocation is, it is what may follow that could really cost the UK. Many pharmaceutical and life sciences companies wanted to be close to have access to their main regulator. Now that it is here, this is where they're going to want to be too. The winners in all this, the Dutch city authorities, for whom jobs and taxes keep coming. Are you in any doubt that what you're seeing is because of Brexit?
Very little doubt. I mean, we've seen 30 companies so far, a little bit less than 30, that have relocated to Amsterdam because of Brexit. The majority of companies that could potentially relocate because of Brexit are still sort of in a wait-and-see modus. They don't really know exactly what kind of Brexit will happen, and they're going to make their final decision later.
Much, of course, is going to depend on what sort of Brexit eventually emerges on March the 29th. But the exodus across the Channel is real and may have a way to run.
Question, and I've answered it from within the industry, but from without the industry, the news industry. Why do you think people like Digby Jones are still getting booked to appear on programmes despite having been proved wrong about absolutely everything? I'd love just to know, because I'm in the bubble. 0345 6060 973. Because you can say, I know I'm right, and then tell voters what the head of Ford will do, right? And then 2.5 years later, the head of Ford turns around and says, we are contemplating removing all production from this country because of what is happening as a result of Brexit uncertainty, or as a result of Brexit. Why do these people still get booked? I don't know what the answer is from your point of view, but I do know that a lot of you still believe these people, even though they've been proven wrong a million times. And that might be part of the answer. I don't know. Who else would you put on this list? People who've been proved wrong about everything and yet still continue claiming in public or being treated in public. It's almost not their fault. We're all a bit vain. Someone rings up and says, would you like to appear? It's only because of my late father saying to me many years ago, why on earth are you going to Belfast to argue with Peter Hitchens about cannabis? I'd rather put pins in my eyes. And I went, and he was right. So you got, I guess you've got to be incredibly vain not to have the levels of vanity needed to say yes. You've got to somehow think you're above it. But why? Why do you think they're still there, having been proved wrong about everything? Because I don't get it, except this desperation to fill space and fill pages. So in newspapers, you get someone on from a mysteriously funded right-wing lobby group masquerading as a think tank or an educational charity, and they fill a bit of the paper. You've got a story there. Oh, look, Migration Watch has said X. There's a story. There's probably a story in the paper today that's a result of research from a leading think tank. And I get that. That's filling space. But, you know, at some point, surely you have to disqualify yourself from consideration on the grounds of your epic incompetence. Digby Jones. He sits in the House of Lords and spends half his time on Twitter wanging on about the establishment being bad. Angelo's in Kingston. Angelo, help me out, mate.
I'd like to, but I must confess that I'm dumbfounded by the tendency to have Digby Jones on air as well.
Oh.
I've followed Digby Jones for a number of years now, and this
not in a stalking way. You mean merely in a media and political.
It's very easy to see in a crowd,
yes.
Given his girth.
Yeah, well, there's no need for that. But I take your point.
But yes, he has said things which run contrary to established theory. And nobody seems to call him up on it.
Do we know how he ended up being head of the CBI?
I don't. And what is striking is the difference in calibre between his successor, who seems to be very publicity shy. You don't see Caroline Fairbairn on television, but she is somebody who has a very strong pedigree in business and
yes.
also qualified from what was for a long time regarded as the best business school in the world, certainly in Europe, but
is that right?
more recently it was regarded as the best business school in the world. And when you compare that to somebody who absolutely, somebody who would be considered an expert, when you compare that to somebody who ran a medium-sized law firm in
well, he was a senior partner for 3 years, I believe. I'm open to correction on this.
But it wasn't, it wasn't a large law firm in terms of its turnover or its stature.
Right.
To take up what is one of the sort of marquee positions within British industry, you have to wonder what prompted that choice. But just to give you an example,
yes.
With regard
can I ask what you do for a living? You seem to be...
I'm a financial analyst by profession, but an economist by academic training.
Radio.
So, for example, going on to the subject of cars.
Yes.
I don't know if you can recall, James, I grew up in the 80s and early 90s. I suspect we're probably of a similar age.
Yes.
But back in those days, BMWs and Mercedes were considered status symbols. They weren't something that the average family could afford. They were quite rare on British roads. And as a consequence of being in the EU and tariff-free trade and the wealth effects that have come from growing GDP, it's not unusual now to see the average family buy one of these cars.
That's right, yeah.
But historically, they were always considered what we call Veblen goods. And a Veblen good is something which, the more expensive it becomes, the more it's desired. And it's often the case with German engineering that the products are Veblen goods.
Right.
So an extra 10% on the cost of a Mercedes, or an extra 10% on the cost of a BMW, I wouldn't think would have a disproportionately large effect on demand.
Gosh. Because it's a badge that advertises how wealthy you are, in a way.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I don't know that I mean, I'm not nodding along with you, but I don't know that I cheer you from the sidelines. It's your field of expertise, but it's not definitive, is it? I mean, a lot of people listening will think, no, I can only just afford it, and if it was 10% more expensive, I wouldn't be able to.
Right. I can't comment on the...
No, I know.
But ability to afford a BMW or Mercedes, other than to say it's become a lot better over the last 20 years. And certainly, if you go back 20 years, you'd find that the people who can now just about afford a Mercedes or a BMW couldn't even dream of owning one.
even the stuff he might be right about, he would in a sense be wrong about.
The other point I was going to make was that if you have a situation whereby you cripple the British car manufacturing industry through something like a no-deal Brexit, and you have this situation where you've got this inherent inefficiency in production, that in itself will inflate the cost of cars produced here, irrespective of whether tariffs are applied or not. So even if you have zero tariffs going out from exports, which under World Trade Organizations you couldn't do, because you would have to then give zero tariffs to everybody, to the Japanese, to the Chinese, etc., etc.
And which is the Patrick Minford model that would destroy car production and agriculture. So what the weird thing that my world throws up today is people who think that they're on the same side as Patrick Minford and Jacob Rees-Mogg, but will now be arguing furiously that Ford aren't going to do anything of the sort, and if they are, it's all because of something that happened in Dagenham 100 years ago, or it's all linked to this and it's not linked. So the people who they're actually on the same side as are the ones who have said, no, look, our plan will involve the destruction of production of manufacturing in this country. That level of cognitive dissonance, I think, is the fault of people like Digby Jones. Because if you're sitting at home listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg on this programme, effectively conceding that Patrick Minford's economic analysis is the only one that he ever cites, and that effectively involves the destruction of manufacturing and agriculture, you don't want to think, oh, hang on a minute, I found myself cheering for the destruction of manufacturing. Then you hear someone like Digby Jones on the telly, who's a lever in name, doesn't actually understand anything, and says stuff that you can derive comfort from.
Absolutely, yes.
I know I'm right, he says, while being incredibly wrong.
And I think he relies on this title of being the former...
well, of course he does, because, you know, people are busy. They've got schedules to fill. They've got someone screaming in their ear, we need a guest, we need someone on to come on and defend it. Well, Digby Jones, yeah, he's fine, he used to run the CBI. And no one ever says, because everyone's busy, no one ever says he's wrong about everything. He's wrong about everything.
He has been wrong about everything that I've heard him talk about when it comes to economics. But just
I'm going to be late for the news. So do it in a minute. Do it in 30 seconds if you can.
Yes, I was going to say that the general price level of cars would rise even domestically as a consequence of the inefficiency. So although you've got the increase in the price level of imports coming in, you've also got the fact that prices would have to rise because car manufacturing has wafer-thin margins. So it's either going to be uneconomic to produce, in which case everything will be produced elsewhere, and then everything will be subject to tariffs coming in, and therefore the price level generally would rise, making the welfare effects mean that people in the country would be worse off anyway.
Yes, I mean, I understand most of what you say, but I'm not arrogant enough to pretend that I understand all of it. I'd need to ask you a couple more questions and dig a little deeper on a couple of the issues that you've made, but I understand exactly what you said about Digby Wrong being wrong about Digby Wrong. Digby Wrong, that's it.
That should be his name.
Let's just call him Digby Wrong. Should we call him Lord Digby Wrong? Lord of Wrongness. Digby Jones, Lord of Wrongness. Angelo, have a great day. This is what I mean by the damage people like Digby Jones have done. The question today is why they're still allowed to do it in public. You know, why is he not disqualified from public commentary on the grounds of being really, really bad at it? He said, he predicted, he said, I know I'm right. In fact, listen to this clip again, because this is the absolute essence of Brexit. A big, blustering bloke from Birmingham bloviating ignorantly about Brexit with an air of authority and knowledge. TV and radio producers, newspaper commentators and writers need copy, so they need to get someone in. Nobody reputable with a reputation for being right is available, because there isn't anybody on the Brexit side who fits that category. You could book John Redwood, but of course he'd be asked why he's advised investors to move their money out of Britain. You could book Rees-Mogg, but he'd be asked why his fund has opened 2 new funds in Dublin. You could get in, I don't know, David Davis. David Davis has been proved wrong about everything. He's not a business person, actually, is he? So if you wanted someone from business, not politics, who are you going to get? James Dyson's too busy opening his new headquarters in Singapore. The bloke from JCB doesn't need to make appearances in public because he's paying 60 grand a year to David Davis for 20 hours work. Boris Johnson's on the payroll. Daniel Hannan's on the payroll at JCB. Yeah, at what point do people just wake up and go, oh, hang on a minute, we are the baddies? And Digby Jones is the perfect example. Here he is being horribly wrong about everything again.
Germany sells 1 million cars a year in Britain. So the first time that this Frenchman who's going to be negotiating for Brussels says, well, we're going to put 10% on tariff on every Jaguar that's sold in Berlin, I sincerely hope that the Brit doing it the other way will say, well, then there's 10% on every BMW sold in Britain. And the moment that happens, and every Audi, and every Mercedes, and every Fiat. So the moment you say, well, I'm sticking a 10% tariff on every Focus that's made in Valencia and sold in Birmingham, I sincerely hope that the boss of Ford, well, I know I'm right, the boss of Ford, the boss of Audi, the boss of Mercedes, straight into Merkel, saying, what are you doing? And I think it'll be 0 tariff, not because Britain wants it, but because it's in no one's interest that it doesn't happen.
Unbelievable. I know I'm right, he says, and we know you're wrong. So why are people like that still out there? He also said that no jobs would be lost as a result of Brexit. This is the big mystery for me now. And it's very hard for me to negotiate because obviously 99% of people who are in this business still book people like Digby Jones. I had a breakthrough moment yesterday when Theo was sitting here and I asked him a question about Theresa May and he started telling me what Boris Johnson has done recently. And Theo was right. Boris Johnson's behaviour is relevant to Theresa May's tactics. But in the context of our job, keeping you informed about the facts that the country is currently facing, Boris Johnson should be a complete irrelevance. He has been proven to be wrong about everything. All of the predictions, all of the promises have proved unkeepable. So why do we still give these people the oxygen of publicity? The damage they do is immense. Here's a bloke in Spain, interviewed by Channel 4 News at the weekend, who sums up everything.
But Dave, who bought his Spanish holiday home after voting to leave, no longer wants to.
What's the biggest thing you think you've learned that swayed you?
Well, the freedom of movement in Europe, you know, for the proper European to be...
So you want to keep your own freedom of movement so that you can come back and forth between here and the UK?
Yes, I know it might be selfish, but I think on reflection now, we'd probably vote for, if we had a referendum, probably the other way now.
Vote to remain now?
To remain,
I think you might have shot yourself in the foot a little bit.
Might have done, yes. Very well have done.
See, don't get cross with Dave. He's a sweet man, and at least he's honest enough to admit his mistake. Didn't understand. Why didn't he understand? Because he was told a lot of fibs. Or just misunderstandings. So why are the people who told the fibs and broadcast the misunderstandings still being wheeled out to comment on incredibly complicated issues that they clearly don't understand? Paul's in Brighton. Paul, what's going on?
Hello, James. James, let me tell you a little bit about myself. We've got the time, right? My family come from Southern Ireland, Ballyduff, County Kerry. Okay, we have a farm there which was got in. We lost it. I live here now, and I believe in this country. And I would say that, you know, well, first of all, I'd like to say that people should listen for a while, sit down and listen to Steve Baker. He'll tell you what's going on as far as negotiations.
Did you hear him being...
That's why he resigned.
Did you...
Ex-Minister Steve Baker.
Yeah.
I'll go back on to...
I think was he not interviewed this morning about the 20 questions? Or was that Barclay, the new Brexit?
So Baker, Steve Baker.
So what's Baker said that would support?
Well, he's saying that May was totally arrogant and stubborn, and really kept.
So he's blaming it on someone else.
No, blaming it on her.
Yes, Theresa May.
And she was.
Digby Jones is blaming it. Digby Jones is blaming it on the EU and the establishment. Steve Baker's blaming. It's never their fault, Paul, is it?
But why shouldn't we set up businesses around the world if we want to trade with the world?
You have to have a trade agreement with them.
Well, we're going to do that after the 29th.
No, Liam Fox said we'd have it all sorted by the end of next month.
No, we should have started doing it on the day after the referendum.
You're not allowed to do trade negotiations as a member of the single market with countries that aren't.
We didn't have a Brexit minister leader.
You're not allowed, Paul. You're not.
All this trouble.
Okay, mate, I'm not going to argue with you. You think everything?
I'm not arguing, James. I want to discuss with you, old chap.
Yeah, but stuff you're saying isn't true. I mean, so you think? So talk me through what the plan would have been if Digby Jones had been in charge.
Well, Digby Jones, I'm not too keen on him. Actually, I agree with you on that.
All right. Well, Steve Baker then. If Steve Baker had been in charge, what would we have done differently?
Which is actually funded 0.6 by the EU.
I'm sure it is, but here's the question for you. If Steve Baker had been in charge, what would he have done differently?
Well, he would have been a Brexiter, so he'd have actually told the EU that they either come to us with a deal or we're walking away.
They did.
They didn't.
No, that's exactly what happened.
No.
We've negotiated a deal.
James,
27 countries have agreed to the withdrawal agreement. Theresa May's 2.5 years of negotiating it resulted in it being put before Parliament, and Parliament...
She put all... She gave the things they didn't ask for, and it's a fact.
But, again, I'm not going to argue with you, but we have to...
It's not an argument, it's a fact.
I know, we have to inhabit the same reality. What would Steve Baker have done? He'd have told them that they have to fall into line with what we want, or we will walk away.
Well, that's exactly what he should have done.
But that's exactly where we are now.
They would have come to us with a deal.
They did.
They didn't.
Oh, so what was the withdrawal? What was the
with this with an ultimatum?
What was the withdrawal? But you've just said that we should have gone to them with an ultimatum.
No, they should have come to us.
Oh, Paul, I don't understand what you're saying, and I've got a horrible feeling you don't either.
It's up to them to keep us in.
Yeah.
If they want to.
Okay. So why do you think Ford is preparing to remove all production from the United Kingdom?
Well, I'm not too concerned about that. I think about time.
No, I didn't ask how concerned you were.
I'm actually an engineer.
I asked why you
used to make parts for Rolls-Royce, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, at a time when Britain did
they're all
manufacturing industry.
They're all it still does have a manufacturing industry. Otherwise, there'd be no production to remove from the United Kingdom.
Making British cars that we sell to the world, not
yeah.
Nissan or whatever. I mean, Nissan pulled out because the diesel banned. We know that. You know that. You're an intelligent man.
I know what the head of Nissan said, and diesel is definitely part of the decision to only make the new car in Japan. But he said Brexit.
They've increased their staff.
Paul, the head of Nissan said Brexit uncertainty is a contributing factor. Why would he lie?
Well, it may be. Well, it is. I mean, Brexit. People are not going to buy the diesel car because we were sold
Well, I can't, mate. I don't know what to say. I've got lots of people waiting to talk to me.
But one last thing.
Yeah,
when we talk about your Ian Duncan Smith conversation, I listened to very carefully, and I'll say that we have to take into account
Ian Duncan
10%
Smith
of the British people or the world IQ is less than 85. They're virtually unemployable.
Right.
We have a problem. The world has a problem.
Paul, my friend, what are you talking about now?
I'm talking about 85%, 10% of the population, the world population, is unemployable because their IQ is under.
But why are we talking about that?
Well, because if we have a problem about unemployment in Britain, there'll always be unemployment. We're never going to solve that problem.
Paul, I'm going to wish you a great day. I really am. I hope you're well. If you think you can make the case more articulately than Paul, then ring me. Don't tweet rude abuse of Paul on social media, OK? Because at least he's got the guts to ring in. 0345 606 0973. Oh, my days. Ian's in Leeds. Ian, Digby Jones.
Yeah. I think part of the problem with people like Digby Jones is they can speak BS authoritatively. So people will believe them because they've got an air of authority about them. So people will actually think, well, this guy must be correct. He must know what he's saying because he's on television.
Yeah,
and
but then why would you choose to believe him and not to choose to believe the current head of the CBI, or the person who runs Nissan, or the person who runs Ford, or the person who runs Panasonic, or the person who runs Sony, or the person who runs Airbus, or the person... I could go on. So what is it that... I mean, because he must be feeding... for me, the significant bit in that clip is probably the way he says Frenchman. I wonder whether that's what appeals to Brexiters. He seems to be sneering at someone for being French. Hey, he's my boy.
Well, I think you're onto something, because I think it's about having a common enemy. My enemy's enemy is my friend and all that.
Yeah.
For example, Digby Jones was on BBC Radio 4 a few days ago, and he kept talking about the political establishment without actually realising he's part of the same political establishment. So he gets away with it.
Yes.
And he also gets away with saying on the 29th of January 2019, he said, I actually campaigned for Brexit and made it very clear in every speech we would be economically worse off.
I know. Well, I know. Yeah, I know. He lied. I mean, it's the problem, isn't it?
But there you are. And I think it's because people look at Digby Jones and think, oh, well, he must be a successful businessman. Therefore, he must know what he's talking about. And I think people are hoodwinked, and I'm sorry to say, I think people partly hoodwink themselves because, as I said, it's about having a common enemy. So if your enemy is the same as mine, I will believe you.
Yeah, but the problem, but I've got a problem with this because I don't think I don't think everybody who has somehow decided that Digby Jones is worth listening to is drawn to his rudeness about someone being French. There must be something more substantive there, mustn't there?
If there is, I'm not sure what it is, to be honest, because, why is Digby Jones then seen as a credible business figure full stop when there must be many others who they could turn to?
We found the clips, didn't we, of him saying, this is similar to, we found him saying now he'd warned all along that there was going to be economic damage, and then the quote from him saying prior to the vote that everything was going to be great. And so why is he still booked? That's the problem I don't understand, and I can see from Twitter I've already upset Ian Dale, which always breaks my heart when I upset Ian Dale. But I presume Digby appears on Ian's show a lot, so rather than answer the question of why, Ian's telling me that he once ran a successful hospitality business, and therefore we should listen to him, to the solicitor from Birmingham, who said that he knew how the boss of Ford would respond to Brexit, and the boss of Ford has now warned the Prime Minister that they're preparing to remove all production from the company. What is it? So why can't people in this line of work just say, probably shouldn't have him on again? What with him being wrong about everything?
Well, we only have to look at how many times Nigel Farage has been on BBC Question Time.
Yeah, but he's... It's not the same. No one thinks Farage actually understands business. Digby Jones is held up by... I really like and respect Ian Dale. He thinks Digby Jones is still worth listening to. So how bad does it have to be? Listen to the clip again. How bad does it have to be before people turn around and say, actually, look, we'll stay friends and everything, but I'm not broadcasting you to the country again because you bear responsibility for the fact that with 44 days to go, nobody knows what's going to happen at the end of March.
I think there's some things I'll hold my hand up, and there's some things I don't really know the answer to.
Me too. And I don't know the answer to this. I don't want to speculate because that leaves us into the realms of rudeness. Nobody likes rudeness. It's 10:48. Although I am prepared to make exceptions in the case of a monumental pudding like Lord Digby wrong. Digby Jones told Newsnight the other day that during the referendum campaign, every speech he gave made it crystal clear that we would be economically worse off after Brexit.
or no, it's the 48% as well. Now, no deal is not what people voted for, because in 2016, every single Brexit campaigner said we would get a better deal with the EU. In fact, the entire narrative of they need us more than we need them is predicated on the idea that they're going to give us a good deal.
I actually campaigned for Brexit, and I made it very clear in every speech I gave we would be economically worse off.
I'm joined now by the former Trade Minister, Digby Jones, and Richard Reid, who founded Innocent Smoothies, and he's campaigning for Britain to stay in the EU. Welcome to both of you. Digby Jones, the EU accounts for 45% of our exports. Why would you risk any of that?
Well, that won't change, because in the morning after any referendum result to come out, Germany, and it's pivotal on Germany, would immediately want some form of tariff-free arrangement with Britain. They make 1 million cars they sell in Britain a year. 75–80% of all the trains you get on every day in this country are built in Dusseldorf. You know,
sure, you're assuming that, though. We don't know for sure.
No, we don't. No, absolutely right. And what is more, the moment Germany did it, the others would follow, and we would enjoy that as well. There are many arguments to stay in, and there are many arguments to come out, but the one thing that we ought to kill this canard now, is that not one job in Britain is at risk because of EU membership. Not one, because there would be a free trade agreement because we're so important to Europe. And by the way, that doesn't mean that there aren't other reasons why we might want to be in or out. But I get so frustrated with people who go, 3 million jobs are at risk if we're out of the European Union. It's rubbish.
Okay.
Because it's just not
one job at risk, says Digby Jones.
What impact has the Brexit vote already had on the UK economy? There is context to the question, of course. Jaguar Land Rover says it's extending a shutdown in production in April because of potential Brexit disruption. Deutsche Bank is moving 400 billion euros of balance sheet assets to Frankfurt. 2 insurance giants are moving to the European Union. AIG is moving to Luxembourg, Chubb's moving to France. They say explicitly because of Brexit. Panasonic and Sony are moving their headquarters to Amsterdam because of Brexit. I can actually go on,
of course
but you take the point. But
maybe he's misremembering, but if you're still defending him, then you have to now claim that you knew all along we'd be economically worse off, and then you have to tell us what the benefits are, what we get in return. And you're not allowed to, I'm afraid, on this programme. You are elsewhere. I can only control the 3 hours I'm behind the microphone on this radio station. I can't control any other broadcasters or businesses. But you don't get to offer up a botched or deliberate misunderstanding of what the word sovereignty means as an argument. You just don't. Because it's not an argument. It's a botched misunderstanding of what the word sovereignty means. The British Parliament was always sovereign. Always has been. Hopefully always will be. Quite what Britain is in the coming decades remains unclear. Will it still involve Northern Ireland? Or the United Kingdom would still involve Northern Ireland. Will Britain still involve Scotland in a political sense rather than a merely geographical one? Seems unlikely to me. Why have we ended up in a position of such utter mess? Because we have treated people who don't understand things with the same level of reverence and respect as people who do. It's almost the weaponization of simple falsehoods being comforting because the truth can be so complicated. You want to know what Brexit is going to be like? Try and get the eggs out of a baked cake. And by the way, the cake is good. That's a crucial point to make. Nobody wants reconstituted egg, but that's what Brexit sold. Craig's in Singapore. How appropriate. Craig, what can you tell us?
Hey, good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Look, first of all, on Digby Jones, I mean, without necessarily deep diving him, my experience is always...
God, there's an image I'm going to struggle to shake out of my mind. I don't know what the figure of speech means in the context that you employ it, but my mind went to a very dark place. Carry on, Craig.
Very funny. My experience has been that even in some very large companies, you often find people who are in positions of authority, people who convey knowledge throughout the organisation, who actually don't know very much about what they're talking about. And if you deep dive them, and typically you need a very big crisis before somebody says, look, things have got really pretty bad, we really have to examine some of the stuff that's being told to us by this individual or this director or this chairman. Often you find that actually he's got in his history some sort of career champion, some sort of connector that's propelled him to a position where his views have to matter. And it becomes very difficult for people around him to question it because of his power bases. So I don't really know very much about, to be honest, about Digby Jones, but what I do know is commentary about the UK car industry and whether it's exporting more cars to Asia is just utter nonsense.
Yes.
And I use my common sense. I know nuts about the car industry, and you're going to say, why are you on my show?
No, I'm not.
What I know about the car industry is this. I see factories...
Because I go to the people that run the car industry for my first port of call on car industry related, but I'm quite eccentric. I should be going to Andrew Bridgen.
Well, I mean, I use common sense. Yeah. I see factories throughout Asia, in China, manufacturing Toyotas and Hondas and Nissan and every other make and model of car, generally other than British cars. And they've had deals in those countries to make cars locally for years. So why would a car manufactured by, say, Ford or Toyota in the UK be exported across the other side of the world to a country where they already make those cars? Now, it's utter nonsense to say that, oh, we're going to sell more Minis. A cost of a Mini in Singapore is about £120,000. A cost of an Evoque, and I know this from experience, is about £220,000. Right? These are expensive cars. The tariffs on imported foreign cars across Asia is very, very high. So the idea that some deal is going to be arranged where the cost of these cars is going to become 20%, even if it was 50%, it's academic. These cars are out of the reach of most people in Asia, in China, even if the middle class was to grow. So
are you addressing the question of what our alternative markets will be in the event of losing access to the single market?
Yes.
Right,
yes,
good. So you're the second person on today who's cleverer than me. No, third. There was Paul in Brighton, and I just needed to clarify and double check exactly where we were going with this. So these again, it's the way they reinflate the balloon of Brexit bloviations by saying, well, we'll sell all our cars to China. We don't need to sell to France.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the final point I'd like to make to you, though it's slightly off Digby Jones.
Go on.
It's just around financial services, because I hear people bang on about this all the time. Well, we're going to open up all these wonderful Asia financial services market. Look, whoever says that doesn't really understand very much about financial services. All of the big foreign investment banks, whether it's JP Morgan, Credit Suisse, and the words in the name, Morgan Stanley in the US, they have capabilities out of the UK, but actually they're already well represented in Asia. They've had Asian businesses and offices for years. The big problem for foreign services going into countries like China is 10 years ago, maybe, Goldman Sachs was an important player, JP Morgan was an important player. In a league of financial service providers now, it's dominated by Chinese investment banks.
With respect, Craig, do you know what we've done this hour? We've kind of solved the problem from the other end, because you are knowledgeable and detailed. And if you were in a studio with somebody who was just going, well, I wouldn't trust a Frenchman, he'd get some applause. Oh, man, that was a portentous... Look at Ivan there leaning on the music button at just that moment, because he would. You'd sit there saying, no, I do this for a living. The other fella was the financial analyst, a trained economist. I do this for a living, and they'd explain the detail of it. The head of Jaguar Land Rover explains it. The head of Nissan explains it. The head of Ford, in this instance, explains it. The head of P&O, the head of Airbus, they all explain it. But then Digby Jones just goes, yeah, I think you'll find a Brit will get the better of a Frenchman. and that is somehow balanced, Craig. That's the problem we've got, isn't it?
James, you're solid, your opinions are solid, don't deviate, don't go to the dark side.
I don't even know where the dark side is anymore, but it's just questions that I ask. And if you can't answer them, it's not my fault.